There aren't as many pleasure boats as there are automobiles yet in this country. There probably won't be for quite some time. But nonetheless, boating has become America's most popular form of family adventure. Now, just because the Coast Guard is there to help people who get into trouble, that doesn't mean that you should relax and get careless. In case you're in trouble on the water, remember to make sure that somebody else knows you're in trouble. Then if somebody has to come looking for you, you've got a much better chance of being found right away. I hope you've enjoyed sharing this true adventure with us. Until we meet once again, this is Bill Burrid saying, may all your adventures be happy ones.
When someone's in trouble offshore, the United States Coast Guard is sure to be called in. Distressed persons, vessels, or aircraft, all of these are the responsibility of the Coast Guard's search and rescue system. Coast Guard air stations operate round the clock, ready for any emergency. A distress call brings the whole system into action. Not all rescue operations are this easy. Sometimes it takes the coordinated efforts of aircraft, surface vessels, and most of all, well-trained men to save lives and property at sea. The Coast Guard is often put to work in cases of illness or injury. But you most often associate search and rescue with saving lives endangered by accident or foul weather, or sometimes, as we'll see, by simple thoughtlessness. Whatever the reason, though, a call for help means that search and rescue goes to work. The Rescue Coordination Center. This is where the brain of search and rescue is located, and it's here that any rescue activity actually begins. With more than 30 million Americans interested in boating, there's lots of opportunity for trouble. Take this young couple, for instance. They're getting an early morning start for a day's fishing. They plan to get their catch and be back in good time. Her mother expects them home by 4 this afternoon. There's a little knock in the engine, but it started without any trouble, and anyhow, the young man's a good mechanic. He knows his boat. Besides, if they do run into some kind of difficulty, all they have to do is send an emergency message to the Coast Guard. It's that simple. But today, the fish aren't cooperating. Perhaps they've moved to a better feeding area, so we'll just have to go after them. It's late afternoon. The girl's mother is beginning to worry a little. Her daughter and son-in-law are more than an hour overdue. Of course, she knows that many perfectly ordinary, everyday circumstances may have delayed them. But if they're ashore, they'd have called her. If they're not, if they're still at sea, then they might just need help. The controller gets the call at the Rescue Coordination Center. He asks for the number and description of the missing boat, the persons aboard, where they were going, when they were supposed to be back. To the Coast Guard, an overdue boat is never a routine matter. The controller puts an overdue marker on the boat's last known location. It may have moved. Of course, if it has, and if it is really in trouble, It may be hours before we find it. On the other hand, the couple may just have started back late. But the controller is taking no chances. Assuming trouble, he diverts a helicopter that's on its way home from an inland search for a small plane. And so, the search for the missing boat begins. Meantime, the controller has also alerted one of the Coast Guard's harbor patrol craft. This 40-footer is on routine duty along the waterfront when word comes in to make an immediate search of the harbor. We still don't know for sure that the missing boat may not be somewhere quite close by. The patrol craft begins its search as daylight begins to fail. Two hours overdue. Still, no sign of the missing boat. The controller drafts a message alerting all vessels in the area to be on the lookout. The alert goes to the message center. From here, it goes by teletype to the Coast Guard air station, to lifeboat stations, and by radio to Coast Guard vessels at sea. At the Coast Guard air station, the alert message goes to the operations duty officer. More and more men are becoming involved in the search. Out at sea, a Coast Guard cutter receives the alert. It's on a routine patrol in the general area of the missing boat's last known location. The cutter changes course and begins a search. But there's not much daylight left. Time for visual search is limited, and a small motorboat at sea is seldom found easily. By now, the teletype circuit has alerted the lifeboat stations. At this particular lifeboat station, a lookout makes an immediate search of the beach and the nearby ocean. But there's nothing to see. Minutes later, this 40-footer leaves the lifeboat station. It'll cover as much coastal area as possible before darkness falls. But there are only minutes of daylight left. In addition to the 40-footer, this 36-foot lifeboat is sent in search along the coastline. Somewhere in the gathering dusk, the missing boat is drifting. The young couple's troubles are multiplying. Engine trouble has left the boat helpless. A call to the Coast Guard would solve all their problems. But with a low battery and no engine to replenish it, the radio will receive but won't transmit. It looks like a long night ahead. You might say that a night alone at sea would be a good lesson for the pair aboard that lost boat. But it's not that simple. A weather report shows a bad storm heading their way from the southwest. The chance of bad weather makes the search even more urgent. The controller tells the 95-footer to search all night using radar. and notifies him of the storm moving in from the south. The area covered by the search is growing. A boat lost at sea without power or radio facilities is in definite trouble. The Coast Guard radio station broadcasts the weather report about the storm to the entire search and rescue network. Radio contact with shore installations and ships at sea is constantly maintained. The operation has moved into high gear. Another hour has gone by.
Meanwhile, on the local scene, the Coast Guard is still searching for the missing pleasure craft reported earlier on this program. It is believed that a young married couple are the only persons aboard the missing boat. Coast Guard search and rescue units, including helicopters, cutters, and amphibious aircraft, are intensifying their search operations this morning. A storm, centered southwest of the coast, is moving rapidly northeast, and the couple in the lost boat may be directly in the path of the oncoming storm.
Worried parents are nothing new to the Coast Guard. Relatives and friends of missing persons usually keep the phones busy down at the Coordination Center. The controller gives his caller all the information he has and assures her that everything possible is being done. In fact, an even more thorough search is now being planned. The controller radios the 95-foot cutter, advising the skipper that if necessary, aircraft will be added to the search force as soon as there's light enough to see by. In areas of heavy air and boat traffic, the Rescue Coordination Center is a busy place. The case we've been following isn't the only one being handled right now. There are others: sinkings, groundings, medical evacuations, and aircraft incidents keep the teletypes busy. The storm has grown worse. The storm's progress is watched carefully at the Rescue Coordination Center. This is the commanding officer of the Coast Guard Air Station, at home and almost ready for bed. The call is from the operations duty officer at the air station. He says that the Rescue Coordination Center has ordered an air search. It'll start at first light in the morning. Again, the worried mother calls in. The controller tells her that planes and helicopters will join the search at dawn, unless, of course, the missing boat is found before then. And then a coffee break, as things quiet down. But not for long. A plane is missing up north. The controller marks its last known position on the big chart. Meanwhile, the cutter continues its search for the lost boat. Dawn and still no luck. There's nothing random about the cutter's search. Her pattern is an expanding square that provides complete coverage of the area. Now the controller radios the cutter. He says that the latest weather shows the storm moving steadily in this direction. He also tells him that he's ordered the air search and it's about to begin. The storm front is now affecting local weather conditions. Storm warning signals are being raised. Today, fishing and pleasure boats won't be going far from shore. The cutter's commanding officer is given full details of the impending air search. At the air station, the operations duty officer gets a last-minute weather report. The aerial search is going to be a race against time and the approaching storm. aircraft out is the amphibian. It can land or take off on either land or sea, and it has more range and speed than a helicopter. A second helicopter followed. With the aircraft on the job, the Coordination Center reevaluates the whole situation. This is the area that the boats from the lifeboat station covered before dark yesterday. Now one helicopter is searching north and the other south. As you can see, they're covering a lot more area. The amphibian is conducting a modified expanding square pattern. The amphibian moves seaward from the shore area. Each leg of its pattern increases the size of the area searched. Everyone stays in close radio contact. Each unit knows just what the others are doing. One of the helicopters returns to the air station to refuel. Once refueled, it'll take off once more to expand its designated search area. The time available to complete this operation is growing shorter minute by minute. The storm is worse. It's battering its way steadily toward the search area. On the chart, weather symbols mark the storm's advance. But as long as we've still got any kind of flying weather, the search goes on. The helicopter's previous search is now extended further toward the south along the beach. The lost boat, meanwhile, is drifting helplessly. The cutter gets the word from the plane the boat's been found. Getting the boat's location, it immediately starts off in that direction. One of the helicopters alters course too. It'll hurry to the scene, take the boat in tow. This is one phone call that the controller is always happy to make. It's the call that reports that the search is over. The lost boat's been found and both occupants are safe. He also tells her that her daughter and son-in-law will soon be ashore and the time and place she can meet them. But the actual rescue isn't over yet. The amphibian is keeping an eye on them. But they'll have to wait a little longer until the slower moving helicopter gets here. We're about to see a new development in rescue techniques. Having disabled small boats towed in by helicopters saves a great deal of time. tow line is dropped to the waiting boat. And so, the helicopter takes the boat in tow. The copter will tow the boat far enough to rendezvous with the 95-footer, which is on its way to meet them. The tugbird operation is just about to come to an end when the cutter arrives. From here, the cutter will take over. Neither of the boat's occupants have been injured. There's no need for any Coast Guard personnel to come aboard. Everything seems to be under control. And so the cutter will just take the boat in tow for the rest of the way in. Safely inside the harbor now, the cutter maneuvers the boat into position to come alongside the dock. Dry land again. The family is reunited. The young boat enthusiasts are a good deal wiser than they were yesterday, and finally the Coast Guard comes aboard to determine the exact cause of the search and rescue incident. Remember these initials, S-A-R. To the Coast Guard, they mean search and rescue. To thousands of Americans, they've meant the difference between life and death. Ever since the United States Coast Guard was founded in 1790, its men have written many proud chapters in the annals of the sea and true adventure.
Hi there, welcome to Adventure. According to the story by Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe spent more than 20 years on his desert island before being rescued. Now, actually, Alexander Selkirk, the real-life sailor whose adventures provided the inspiration for the Crusoe story, was marooned for months rather than years, when he was just plain lucky. Because in the early 1700s, that kind of rescue was a matter of blind chance. But today, anyone in trouble at sea has a lot more than chance working for him. Search and rescue is one of the primary activities provided by the United States Coast Guard in peacetime. And whether the trouble is a downed plane or a disabled liner or just a family pleasure craft with power failure, the men of the Coast Guard swing into action. Helicopters, planes, and surface craft begin scouring the sea. An overdue vessel is always considered an emergency. In an average year, the Coast Guard search and rescue program saves 5,000 lives and $450 million in property. In this episode of True Adventure, we're going to see how they go about it.